Hey guys, so since the Logic 10.4 X.4 update, we now have a couple of new features in Alchemy that I want to talk about today. Specifically, I want to talk about the sidechain input, which if you now open Alchemy, there it was very quickly, you see this sidechain at the top here, which by itself doesn't look very significant, but it's actually a super big deal because it allows us to use external audio or like audio from somewhere else in the DAW to trigger basically anything inside Alchemy. So what I did, I'll first initialize my preset here, is I set up a melody which sounds like this. Alright, and then I have two different sidechain sources I want to try. The first one is just like they're sidechains, so they don't have to sound pretty. This one sounds like this. So just one dotted 8-note rhythm, and I sent that to bus 20, which has no output, so we don't actually hear this one. And then I solo locked that group, so that's always soloed. You can do that by control clicking on the solo button. And then I have another drum loop that I want to try later. It sounds like this. And that's also going to that same bus. So for now I'm going to mute that one, and I'm just going to use this rhythm right here. By the way, I often use an arpeggiator for my sidechain, so basically this is just a super simple sort of low sound. And the reason it's low is because that tends to trigger the triggers a little bit better. And then I use an arpeggiator to set my rhythm, if it's on. So that way you have a lot of flexibility. All right. So inside Alchemy, what we need to do is we need to listen to that bus, which we were already doing. But in case you haven't done it, you can just select your bus here. And then if you go to the envelope follower here, it says master post effects by default. You can go to audio and then sidechain, and now it will actually listen to that bus. And in fact, if you play this, you can see the trigger there, and you can set the shape. So let's first try that just on our filter. So I'm going to click the cutoff here. I'm going to go to envelope follower and choose envelope follower 1, and then this is another new thing. By default the modulation amount is 0, so we need to set that there. I'm going to give it a negative amount, and now that filter should close every time it gets an input signal. And if you start thinking about it, there's like an insane amount of stuff that you can do with this, because now, for example, you can listen to your kick drum, and then every time there's a kick drum, you can close the filter, or you can make something more stereo, or you can give it more reverb. So let's experiment with a few things. I'm gonna I think I'm gonna use this loop and not the standard sidechain. And then I also want to listen to that loop for now. So I'm going to send it to my output as well. So this would be a cool one as well. Let's try the sync parameter there. So envelope follower 1. We'll give it some amount. This still confuses me. Let's give it an octave of range, more or less. And then let's try to send this to effects bus A, and on there let's get a reverb going, maybe some convolution reverb, which here's another new thing. These are now actually in alphabetical order. Something you would expect, but now it actually does that. So let's see what this one sounds like. So let's assign that same envelope follower here to the wet signal, and let's give that a negative amount, and then we give the dry the same envelope follower but a positive amount, so they're gonna switch, sort of alternate. Okay, so that's all good fun, but there's one thing that might be even more interesting. Let's go with a new source. Let's actually do something a little bit more fancy than these saways. Let's get some sort of Apple loop going. Let's go for a guitar, because guitars are great. That's beautiful. Okay, so I've loaded that in source B, which I'm going to solo for now. The position is automatically controlled with this LFO, meaning that it's going to stay in sync. Doesn't sound that great. Let's actually mute my drums for now. They still be going to the sidechain, but just mute them. And then we can fix this a little bit. Okay, so let's take filter 2. So I'm now sending this to filter 2. So let's send filter 2 to a different effect rack. Let's send it to B. Let's do something there with, I don't know, acoustic reverb. And let's see, a delay, why not? And a filter. And then I just want to make sure that we're in pitch, so I'm once again going to use my comb filters for that. By the way, they updated this whole list as well, which is great. They still show you the original name, which is nice if you got used to that. So let's go for the comb. Oh yeah, this I'm not a big fan of. The double clicking is now a different default value for the comb filter, so we need to manually set this to what is it, 131 Hertz, and then add our key follow. All right. Okay, and now let's try. Here's actually the thing I wanted to show you. Sorry, that took a while. what we can do is we can also use this as a sort of a via or an aux modulation source, meaning we can use it to modulate the depth of some other modulator. So let's go with a new LFO on this filter here, and let's give that a saw down, ramp down pattern. I will set that to 16 notes, so it sounds like that. Again, we have to give it the amount. So now this depth control here, without that we don't hear anything basically. So we can actually control that with an envelope follower as well, and give that some amount. So now, depending on the incoming trigger, is going to give more or less modulation from that LFO to the filter. And that's beautiful because it gives you super dynamic sounds. You can see here the LFO2 is being applied to this filter cutoff, and then the depth is being controlled by our envelope follower, and we can give that some more amount. And in fact, I believe that we can go for a new envelope follower here as well, and also let that listen to the sidechain, and then we can give it a different attack and a different release. So you can use that same source in multiple different ways. So let's try to give this one, let's find like a suitable range. Okay, let's see if that sounds any good with our saw wave also. So if you actually use this with a real drum beat, let's do that, and let's go for a slightly different example. I just want to show you a couple of options. So I have some drums here, which might be a little bit loud. So now you can also hear what it sounds like without demodulation. If I and one other thing to try there is increasing the rhythm of the sidechain for the rhythm of the arpeggiator for the sidechain, and you can of course completely like change that input source. So this is a lot faster. So I really like to mess around with that. It gets really nice expressive sounds. But for now, let's go with a real drum beat. I'm trying to keep these things practical. So I should have a snare drum somewhere in here. I'm going to mute this for a second. There's my snare drum. So I'm going to send my snare drum to that bus. And yeah, let's keep it at that for now, just my snare. And then I want a slightly different example where I just have a sustained note. and then we're gonna duck that, sorry, whenever there's a snare drum hit. So our sustained note. Let's clear this again. They changed some menus, so I'm sometimes a little bit confused. Let's go with additive mode. Let's make a few partials like that, because then we can alter those partials as well, which is nice. And then we'll give it a saw input. Let's set an LFO there to the symmetry. So this would be a cool one. Let's set the odd even partials to listen to our envelope follower 1, and we need to set that up to listen to the sidechain. Give it a full scale. So now every time a snare drum hits, it's gonna go for a more, it's gonna choose the even partials as opposed to the odd partials. So it's gonna go from sort of square wavy to not square wavy. Okay, let's try something more extreme. Let's set an LFO to control the coarse tuning, and we set that to a square wave LFO. We sync that to quarter notes, and we don't set that to bipolar, we set that to unipolar. And now we control this modulation depth with an envelope follower. And by now you should be getting the hang of it, but there's one more thing I want to show you. In fact, for this one I'm going to use a new envelope follower, and then I'm going to set that up to listen to the sidechain, and that's going to have a very fast attack and a long release. Now we're probably going to run into some problems here. Let's see what this sounds like. So I'll set this to the modulation depth here, envelope follower 2. It was already there. And we give that a range of an octave. Come on, buddy. So now you do hear that on every snare drum the pitch goes up, but it still has some sort of a glide in it, and that's weird because we have a square LFO. How we can fix this is by using mod maps, which makes this whole thing even more powerful. So mod maps, if you don't know exactly what they do, I have a video on those. Basically, if we take a look at the envelope follower, you can see the curve that it's making. And the curve sort of looks like that. It has this rounded slope, and that's why we hear the pitch down effect. And we want to square that off, and that basically wouldn't be possible because our input signal, like most sounds, just have a curve like that with a release and everything. So this is like the shape of the snare drum. But what we can do is we can use a mod map in between there to remap the modulation to new values. And if we make it something like this, we basically say, all right, whenever you have a value that's not 0, this first point here is 0, whenever it's higher than that, immediately go to the full amount. So normally your modulation would be mapped like this, where it's sort of in a linear fashion, but this way it's more binary. It's like either on or off. So let's hear what that sounds like. So we still get a little bit of pitch sweep there at the very end. Let's try to make this even more, 1%, and then this one as curvy as possible. Make it like that. that's pretty cool, right? So now we can do all sorts of fun stuff. There was the secret. So we have to just make straight lines like that. This works a lot better. Okay, one last example is let's set up something that listens to the kick drum of our sound. So we're gonna send our kick drum, which is this one, we're gonna send that to bus 20. And then we disable that one. So now we're only listening to the kick. Let's confirm that by looking in this envelope follower panel. Okay, that looks like it could be right. Let's actually listen to the kick as well. Yeah, so now we're listening to the sidechain bus, and that's only playing our kick drum, so that's good. Just wanted to make sure there. And let's set that up to control the LFO rate on a filter cutoff. So we can keep this sound, remove the modulation there. So let's take one of these fancy filters and let's set up an LFO to that, new LFO, and I'll go with a unipolar sine wave. And I want there to be no modulation depth when there is a kick hit, so that the kicks are sort of more clean. So I choose envelope follower 1, give it a negative amount of -70, and then I set this to +70. Alright, and then let's also set the rate there with a new envelope follower. It's so cool because you get these super reactive sort of sounds where really the drums and the melodic sounds they're really a team, and you get sort of this call of response thing going on. I think it's a brilliant addition to Alchemy. It makes the whole thing so much more powerful. just having fun there. You guys get the idea. Super cool thing. Definitely check it out. And also some other new nice features, which you can find in the Logic release notes. All right, have fun with that, and I'll see you in the next video.